Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Hogan and welcome back to another Draft Today video here on the channel. As we open our first pack, we take a look at everything we have available here, and we actually don't have anything that's all that powerful in this pack. The rare is a Well of Savagery here, which, while valuable, is not particularly powerful. Sapphire's Favor and Canyonwood Fleetfoot are both fairly mediocre at best. The rate on this card is okay, but in the diamond decks, the boards usually gum up a lot, so you want usually a little bit more in your uncommons and your 4-drops than a 2/4. It just like gums the board further. Wild's Favor is okay in the Dreadling archetype, but I don't know that I want to kind of commit to that on my first pack here. Coins, obviously, but I don't think you ever first pick a coin. Cerulean Sage is probably the most playable card in this pack, and I've definitely moved into Sapphire for that card before. I think I'm actually just going to pick up the Well not only for monetary reasons, but also because it doesn't really commit us to anything. There's a lot of times I feel like whatever we first pick out of this pack, it's not a good reason to be in a particular shard, so we're probably not going to play it anyway, so I'm going to grab my couple of dollars here. Maybe we'll get lucky and we'll get past Surging Wildfire. Alright, we got some reasonable cards in this pack here. I don't think Waltz of the Damned is particularly good. We actually had this in yesterday's the day before draft, and we opened it and passed it as well. Webborn Apostate is definitely a card that I could see myself playing. Steal a charge from your opponent and give it to yourself. It'll attach to a 2/1. I think objectively the best cards in this pack are the Feed the Flames because it's a source of removal, and the Butcher for similar reasons. I think because I have this Well of Savagery, I'm going to go ahead and pick up the Feed the Flames and possibly try to move into Ruby. But again, first few picks just trying to get a feel for what people are passing and what they're interested in and what exactly is being opened. Waiting on the next pass here. I think this is quality removal. It's just like 2 costs, deal 3 is fine, and then like if it doubles up and gets something big in the late game, that's also okay. Looking at this pack, we have some good Sapphire cards here in Vigilant Duskwing and Skyspire Scholar. In terms of cards of what we've already got, the Sparkle Cap's actually pretty reasonable when you're in Wild Ruby. You put a Valor gem in here, and then it can be a 3/2 for 3 that you can space out the cost over 2 turns. Blitz is a playable combat trick because it has Mobilize, so you can turn this 3 into a 1 by exhausting one of your troops. I think objectively the best card in this pack is probably the Vigilant Duskwing, but in the context of the cards we have so far, the Searchsmith Engineer is pretty reasonable. Just a 3/2 for 3 that Diligence gain a charge, and it has Scrounge 1 to gain speed. And, you know, like, the rate's not terrible, and it has Relevant Text Box. I'm going to go ahead and pick up the Surgesmith Engineer. You know, maybe we'll end up getting past a bunch of Rift Spasms. We're not going to try and force that deck, because that goes poorly when you force it, but it could end up being very reasonable. Oh, are we upset? Oh, poor Declan. Declan is upset because his parents are very mean. Up next here, we have... Are we pivoting into a second shard off of this pack? I'm not a fan of Ashwood Minstrel as a card. I'm not really a fan of Distract as a card. Definitely not picking it 4th pick. Cards that are objectively powerful in this pack, we've got a Cheap Shot that's very reasonable removal / combat trick. Mindrak Sorcerer is a fine card, just Diligence. Each opposing champion discards a card. It's also 1/3 lethal, so it can like trade up and make your opponent's large threats not be able to attack in. It's possible I could just grab this Strike Force Sergeant here, but I don't think that's particularly powerful either. I think I'm just going to take the Cheap Shot just because it's removal. I actually haven't drafted Blood Ruby in this format before. Maybe it could be... No, that's a lie. I had a Bloody Resacrifice deck one time, and I wasn't particularly impressed with it. I think Cheap Shot's objectively the best card here, with Mindrak Sorcerer being a close second, so I'm going to go ahead and pick this up and just kind of see where we go from there. Okay, and here's a Rock Slider and a Determined Bushy. Rock Slider is a very, very good card. We could possibly stay open for the charge deck and just like keep seeing how the rest of this pack goes, as well as the next pack. Determined Bushy is a very powerful card, but I don't know if it's a reason to move into Wild as our second threshold here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the Rock Slider now, since we already have the Surgesmith Engineer, since we are starting to collect some of the pieces for the charge deck. Maybe we get lucky in that arena regular in our first pack where we took the Feed the Flame, and that second pack where we took the Feed the Flames wheels. Could be very reasonable. Heidi ho the cheerio. This pack, cards that stand out at me. Butcher is probably one of the more powerful cards in this pack, and we're already in a cheap shot, so like maybe we just move into Blood Ruby. There's an Iotachi coins here that can give you a charge, which is very reasonable with our Rock Slider. I'm not a big fan of Tail of Carnage. It's like okay in like the Ruby Sapphire or Ruby Diamond deck because you can put it on an Ada Flyer. I think I'm going to go ahead and grab the Butcher here and maybe start moving into Blood Ruby. We've seen a couple of good Blood cards come around, so maybe that trend will continue. That probably means the Rock Slider's not going to be reasonable, but we'll see. Maybe we end up in like Blood Ruby with Theraz as the champion with a bunch of Underworld cards and some Scrounge stuff. It could not be completely unreasonable. I'm going to hide our Well of Savagery for now. This pack, we continue to see some reasonable blood cards. There is an Eager Lackey in here, which is one of the better wild cards in the set. A Conscripts and Underworld Troop of cost 4. But I think the fact that I've already picked up 2 pieces of quality blood removal, and we've got a Blood's Favor here to generate some card advantage, means I'm going to go ahead and just stick to the blood plan and grab this favor here. Having some card advantage when we're already a little bit removal dense is good. If you just draw too many 1-for-1s, you're not going to have a way to really pull ahead in the mid to late game, and you'll flood out a little bit and die a lot of the time. This pack, the Ruby and the Blood in this pack kind of leave some to be desired. We're already kind of heavy on 3s. If we're going to play Rock Slider, I probably don't want too many unaligned troops. Objectively speaking, the best card in this pack is Mediocre. There's probably between Vanquish and the Howling Plains Runner. I'm not particularly excited to draft either of those. I think I'm going to go ahead and pick up the Draka Outcast, just in case we start getting Conscript cards coming around. There's a Blood Wild Conscript deck, and there's a Blood Ruby a Ruby Wild Conscript deck that's probably both pretty reasonable. So we'll grab Draka just in case it looks like we should pivot into one of those 2 archetypes. Nothing too exciting here. There is a Power and Pain, which is probably the best card in the pack overall, which is kind of sad because I'm not a huge fan of this card. I guess if we end up playing this in our Blood Ruby deck, we can put the Valor gem in it, which makes it a little bit better. Valor and Swift Strike are actually probably both pretty good in here. The Blood gems are kind of mediocre. They're Speed and Intimidate. I'm going to go ahead and grab the Power and Pain. The awkward thing about this card, and the thing you have to keep in mind when you're drafting it, is that even though it falls into the 2 while I've got my cards sorted by cost here, it's not a 2-drop that impacts the board. So when in terms of like curving out and preventing your opponent from curving out on you, Power and Pain doesn't really help with that. Yep, I got a Shadow Blade Splicer here. This is just a fine card to have at your top end. Hopefully we're going to pick up some Dreadling type things. And this has Scrounge 3, deploy, target opposing troop gets -3/-3, so it's an evasive threat that can also kill one of your opponent's troops. Kills threats like Cloudbounder and stuff like that, which is great. A lot of things that -3/-3 gets rid of in the format. This pack, the blood cards are kind of mediocre. I don't think Deny Invoker is particularly playable. Scrounge 2, deploy, gain 2 charges. I think I'd rather be doing better things with my Scrounge than that. I'm going to go ahead and pick up the Sparkle Cap just because I think it's playable if we end up moving into Wild, but I'm pretty happy with what we've got going on here so far. Underworld Oppression is probably a card I'll board in against the Ada decks. I don't think this is main deckable. Opposing troop gets -1/- for each different Underworld race among troops you control. I guess if we end up with enough Underworld, maybe that's fine. Deny Invoker is actually probably the best card in this pack. None of them are particularly great. Just kind of get into the dredges at the end here. This pack, Mechanized Compactor, I guess we might actually play if we pick up some decent Dreadling generators. It's kind of sad that this is a triple... I don't think I mentioned that. We're drafting 666 again today, and there's no Dread Botanist. Ooh, Dread Transport. If we end up in a Dreadling deck, Dread Transport's plenty reasonable. And that was 14th pick, so there's probably no one else drafting Dreadlings at the table of any sort if Dread Transport came around that late. This card's really good when you curve Dread Botanist into it, because then it gives you an artifact to sacrifice, so a little bit worse without access to that for sure. Alright, on-shard bomb, on-shard bomb, on-shard bomb, on-shard bomb, on-shard bomb. Sharpshooter. That's really unfortunate. So there's a Sharpshooter here, and there's a Surging Wildfire. Are we too committed... Are we too committed to blood at this point? I feel like I'm too committed to blood to pivot at this point. Surging Wildfire is just such a bomb. It's a 1/4 with reach 3, with reach 1 and speed, and whenever it attacks, deals damage equal to its power to the opposing champion. There's another Surgesmith Engineer here as well. Sharpshooter's got a good with Conscript too, though. Only have 1/2 wild cards at this point. None of the other cards in this pack are particularly powerful. Like a second Shadowblade Splicer is kind of medium. I guess I wouldn't mind another Surgesmith Engineer. I'm going to pick up the Sharpshooter and kind of stay open to the ideal of Wild. And if the, what's it called, comes back around, the Surging Wildfire, we'll probably move into Ruby Wild. As far as cards in this pack go, Blitz is a plenty playable combat trick. We mentioned that earlier. Rust Bucket Distractor is okay. This pack doesn't have too many powerful cards at it. All the uncommons are kind of mediocre. I don't think this card's ever playable. It's really expensive and clunky for what it does. Sentinel's like, okay. I think I'm going to go ahead and pick up the Blitz here. Probably going to value picking playable Ruby cards a little bit higher in this pack until we see if the Surging Wildfire comes back around, since that would enable us to play Ruby Wild. What are the odds we just end up on awkward 3-shard decks 2 days in a row? Is that too much? I guess it's less unreasonable in this deck since we have this Well of Savagery. Like, what if we just did this? What if we just played all of the things? What if we just played all of the things? All right, so we've got another Rock Slider here, which isn't completely unreasonable in the charge deck. And as far as the rest of the cards of this pack go, this is a good pack for if you're on Sapphire. I guess we got another Power and Pain here for the Sockets archetype too. Huh, honestly, looking at this, so I prioritized picking the Blitz last pack, but looking at the deck like this, we actually don't have that many unreasonable, like, Blood Wild. Huh. I'm gonna grab the Power and Pain for now. Maybe if the cards keep coming, we'll move into the Blood Wild Conscript deck. And yeah, here's another, this is one of the best cards in that archetype, just an Eager Lackey. Conscripts of 4-cost troops, so yeah, I think I'm gonna pick that up. It's the best wild card in this pack. It's kind of sad to pass a Butcher, but I think if we're gonna try and do Conscript, we definitely want some lackeys here. So if I do this, we're 4 picks into this pack, and I've got like 10 playable cards thereabouts. That doesn't seem completely unreasonable. Maybe we could splash like the Feed the Flames and the Blitz off of the Well of Savagery and a couple Ruby Shards. Possibly. It's a shame we won't have a Tinkertron in pack 3 to help fix if we want to splash. As far as this pack goes, things that are powerful and playable are Boisterous Ballad, Sparkle Cap if we have Valors, Turbulence is fine, Feral Root Tactics is usually a fine one of. I'm not sure what I actually want to take here. It's probably the Feral Root Tactics. Usually I end up playing one of these. I don't think I want to commit to Boisterous Ballad or Sparkle Cap. Going Tri-Shard seems a little bit greedy. Dread Apprentice sounds great. It's a good way once we get one troop in the crypt to enable Shadowblade Splicer, which is a card that can sometimes be hard to turn on the Scrounge for. It's also possible that the Garroter there, the 2/2 the blood troop that gains Leaf on Diligence, was a reasonable pickup, just because we're kind of light on 1s and 2s right now. But overall, the curve of this deck is pretty low. Necropolis Coins is probably a fine pickup here. Yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'd probably play in Large or a Turbulence, but we usually end up with enough playables in this format that I'm going to prioritize picking up a coin. And I also think, like I've mentioned this before when we've drafted Blood previously, that this is the best cycling resource in this format, just because aggro decks are usually like chipping away, draft decks are usually like chipping away at each other, and this being able to cycle in the mid to late game and then also like get in those last chip shots on your opponent, really make it a spell shard. Six going okay. Would like 1 to 2 more Draka Outcasts. We've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 conscript cards already, so a couple more conscript payoffs would be ideal, but most of the cards here are like average to reasonable power level. So Turbulence is probably playable as a one-of in the main deck. Web Spinner Prelate is pretty reasonable, though. It gives spiders you control Rage 1. Do we have enough Dreadlings for that to be good? Probably not at this point. I've got, like, exactly Dread Apprentice, I guess. So, yeah, I'm going to grab the Turbulence. I think we're more than happy to main deck the first Turbulence. I feel like every shard has enough random flyers that that's fine. Another coin and a Shadowblade Slicer. I'm going to go ahead and pick up the second Slicer here, just because we already have one Dread Apprentice to help enable the Scrounge easier. I could see an argument being made for these coins, though. We're only at 13 playables, and this pack is half done, though, so I probably want to prioritize picking up playable cards. This is also an additional Necrotic, which helps with our Underworld Oppression being good. This pack, Crossing Swords, this is just very reasonable removal in the Wild Shard. Target troop you control gets 1/1 and can battle target opposing troops. So 10 out of 10 picking that up, and it's playable in our deck. We don't have a ton of very large troops, but there's a lot of troops in this format where, like, times where you're, like, killing evasive troops, or you're just, like, using an Eager Galactic to trade for something with 2. This pack, I'd probably play the Gallant Sentinel, but we're up to 15 playables now. I'm going to grab the Monsagai coins. I'd rather prioritize having those, I think, than grabbing the Sentinel here. I don't think Sparkle Cap's particularly great. I'm going to go ahead and grab the Tomb Swap here. We'll hopefully have enough bombs that this will be reasonable to get something back in the mid to late game, and, like, rebuying a Shadowblade Slicer that's already been scrounged is really big game. Plus, it also provides a Dreadling when we play it, so it can fuel the crypt for more scrounge later. Nothing particularly impressive in here. Maybe the Snarling Brave is playable, but I'd be doubtful of that. Sparkle Cap I don't think is great in Blood Wild. I'm going to grab the Centipede, actually, because maybe we end up playing that if we end up getting enough Riddling Producers, but I wouldn't be too surprised if that's just not going to make it. We've already got 16 playables out of these first 2 packs, so that's plenty fine. Enlarge is plenty playable, and actually I'd rather main deck an Enlarge than main deck a Turbulence. This usually has a similar effect. It gives target troop you control 2/2 at Skyguard, but it's also a card that's capable of like punching through those last couple points of damage in the event that your opponent leaves themselves vulnerable to a trick, killing them. Grab the Magnetize here. None of these cards particularly impressive either way. So, like, medium happy with the deck so far. Like, solid C+ probably. We're looking for a couple more payoff cards for all of the conscripts that we've picked up so far, but okay otherwise. Bomb? Bomb? That's kind of a bomb. Whenever a 4/4 Skyguard for 4, whenever a Ardent Troop enters play under your control, create 2 Valors, puts up in your deck. We really don't have Ardent Troops, do we? Just like mono Underworld, huh? Yeah, I guess we're not drafting that. I think Crossing Swords and Cheap Shot are close. Man, there's another Surging Wildfire if we would have moved into that. That's sad. Anyway, we're definitely past it. I think I'm going to grab the Cheap Shot over the Crossing Swords, just because at this point, we're hoping to get a couple more Conscripts payoffs, and if we get another Conscript payoff or 2, I would like to have the maximum number of Conscripts that are reasonable in our deck. We're up to 6 Conscript cards now. Yep. Would love, like, 2 more Drakas and a Call the Deepwood would be insane. 7 packs to see some of those. I'm going to go ahead and... There's a few different things here. Probed Warpair might actually be the pick just because, like, it's kind of a bomb that pressures our opponent. We also have these 2 Slicers at the top end here that kind of need Scrounge Fodder. We only have Dread Apprentice for that so far. Battle Preparations is another Conscript card, but we don't have enough payoffs for those quite yet, so I think I'm going to grab the Probed Warpair just because it synergizes with the Slicers that we already have. Man, we got past a Flufftail Cloud Killer. Yeah, I planned on playing 18 resources anyways, and this is a nice bomb to round out the top. Other cards that are maybe pickable in here are Sanguine Boon. I don't want another Feral Tactics. I really don't want another Enlarged. Battle Preparations could be my only other consideration. Whoever the Sapphire player is in the pod that gets past the Shackling Strain is going to be real excited. And actually, in Blood Wild, we could put the Intimidation Gem on here if we wanted. But realistically, we're probably going to put the Create a Troop that has cost less than or equal to this. I don't know. And there's probably a strong argument for just putting the Intimidation Gem in this, so that way, after it comes down and clears their evasion, it can just close the game on its own. Nothing too particularly exciting in this pack. I suppose I could pick up this Wild's Favor. It summons 4 Dreadlings, gains 7 life, or gives us 2 Valors. This is like a 1 card. It can like do some burst damage to my opponent, and it single-handedly fuels the Shadowblade Slicer, so that doesn't seem completely unreasonable to pick up. I don't think Withering Gaze is limited playable. I already have a Turbulence in my board, and I don't think Bulky Bisporus is particularly good. Other cards to note in this pack, if you were drafting other shards, Revision is reasonable, Razor Edge Duelist is reasonable. Furious Blitzer I could take or leave. He's like okay if you're short on bombs at the top. And grab this Wild's Favor here. So, looking at this pack, I definitely think that Wild's Favor is worse than this Probed Warpair. I don't think I can afford a 3rd Shadowblade Splicer at this point. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and grab the Probed Warpair. If this Slicer comes back around, we'll probably draft it at that point because we have 2 Probes and a Wild's Favor. But right now, without the second Probed Warpair, I just don't think we can support 3 of these reasonably. There's another Slicer, but here's a Deepwood Draka, which is one of the conscript payoffs that we're looking for. And this actually gives me some hope that maybe this is... Now we're pack 7 out, so we got one more pack to get a potential conscript payoff. Is this reasonable to take over the Butcher? This is actually kind of a tough pack, right? Like, we got a Draka, we've got a Butcher, we've got a Shadowblade Slicer. I don't think Slicer's the pick, but Draka or Butcher could both be reasonable. I've got 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I think I'm gonna take the Draka. 6 conscript cards is probably enough to... Nah, I'm light on removal, right? Alright, yeah, I'm gonna take the Butcher. Feels a little bit bad, but our conscript cards are, like, reasonable without more payoff, and I actually think that the uncommon Draka is worse than this Draka Outcast. I'd rather just, like, build something aggressive most of the time. Zenthos Hunger actually sounds great, especially with the 2 Probe Door pairs that we have. Sacrifice a troop to gain 4 life and draw 2 cards. Gives us a second piece of velocity in the mid to late game. Helps us fill the crypt for Scrounge. Plenty reasonable. It's possible I don't want this Underworld Oppression. It's kind of expensive and a little bit awkward. How many different races do I have? I've got Shinhair. Most of my things are Shinhair, so this probably isn't that good. Hide that for now. This pack actually has some choices in it too. We have another Crossing Swords and we have a Hunger. I think the fact that these Probe Door pairs are just going to like pick up the deck and carry it, it feels like. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and grab Crossing Swords here because this is another piece of quality removal. I'm like, now we're at 2, we've got 6 pieces of removal here, 2 Cheap Shots, 2 Crossing Swords, 2 Butchers, plus a Combat Trick. Honestly, maybe the Cloudtail Killer is just like too expensive. I could also see the Wild's Favor just not being reasonable. Yeah, maybe I'm going to trim that. Or the Fail Root Tactics. I kind of like tactics in decks like this that are slightly aggressive, though. This card just, like, reaches up and kills people, which is nice. If we get a third Slicer, I'm going to play the tactics over... We have a Potent Puffball here. I don't know if that's playable, but I'm gonna draft it. Just in case when this attacks, it gives Shroom Pin you control +2 power this turn. So, important thing to note about this includes itself. So this is a 5/3 when it attacks for 4, which is not completely unreasonable. I think I'm hiding it for now, but we'll see. This is 22 cards right now. I think if we get another Slicer, we'll trim the Cloudtail Killer and the Fail Root Tactics and go Slicer plus the Wild's Favor here. I'll grab a second Turbulence for the board. If we play against the Diamond Sapphire Flyer stack, 10 out of 10. Gonna board that in. We're still a Vigilant Duskwing in that pack, so Sapphire must be fairly open at this table. Nothing particularly exciting in this pack. I don't know that we'll ever board in a second Enlarge, but it's the closest thing to something that we'll use out of all those cards there. Nothing particularly exciting in here. I'll cut the Explosive Interlude because it's the closest thing to playable. Also, if you haven't heard the sound effect this card makes when you play it, it's fantastic. I love the audio clips in this set. There's the Slicer. Yep, okay. So I'm gonna hide the Flufftail and the Feral Root Tactics and then move the Wild's Favor into the main. Our deck's really removal dense, which is kind of sweet. Man. I don't think we have the support for this. Tomb Swap is nice because it generates another Dreadling for us. I'm not sure if we have room to play it, though. Tomb Swap's also good with, like, another Zenthos Hunger Enabler. Sure. Draft one of these. Maybe the curve on this deck is low enough that I can play 17 resources, but, like, we also have 2 coins, so, like, that's, like, reason to go up to 18, but I also have 2 draw spells. Like, most of our cards cost 3 or less, right? Yeah, maybe I'm just jamming 17 in here. I could see that. Maybe let's look at our costs here. I don't have any double blood until there. Yeah, I'm going to try 17. Everyone else plays 17, right? It's a gateway drug, Jeff. Don't do it. Don't only play 17. What are our sockets? Power and Pain is missing a socket. So you have speed. Skyguard Steadfast doesn't seem awful. +1 and Crush doesn't also seem awful. I guess Power and Pain's like a pseudo 2-drop, right? I'm going to put +1 and Crush in these since we're a little bit more aggressive. And the real question is, what's our champion going to be? This could be a Takahiro deck. 18 health, 3 charges. Sacrifice a troop, draw a card, gain 3 life. It helps us enable Scrounge in a pinch. Really, his starting life total is 18, but in reality, you're getting to 6 charges a lot of games, so you're able to basically have like 24 starting life most times if you're not getting aggroed out before the 6th turn. So yeah, I think I'm gonna try this. This seems okay. So, as always, my name is Jeff Hoagland. Remember, if you liked today's Draft Today video, to give it a like on YouTube and share it on your social media. There's lots of other ways you can support my content as well. You can buy Hex TCG singles from our sponsor, Hex Primal. If you use the code Jeff5, you'll get 5% off of all of your orders there. You can also support myself directly by subscribing on Twitch for $4.99 a month or becoming a patron on Patreon. Information on those, as well as the rewards you get for doing those, is linked in the stream or the video description below. And I'll be back tomorrow with another Draft Today. Thanks for hanging out, folks.